Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a viewers edition, 24, and this is where we talk about what you, the viewers, have put forward for The Square resident panelists to discuss. No guests, it's just the resident panelists who I'm happy to introduce, and starting with the gentleman on my right. Well, I'm happy to welcome Charles Haber, resident panelist of The Square. Great to have you on the show tonight.
Happy birthday, Dan, and how are you?
Happy belated. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Berna, great to have you on the show as always.
Thank you so much, Diana.
Great.
Happy belated.
Happy belated. I keep on telling people October is a month of very interesting people.
I know. One of our big fans,
Yes.
Fiona.
Yes. Actually, it's Fiona's birthday today as well. Shout out to her wherever she is. So, what we're going to discuss tonight is a couple of very important issues that the public has put forward to us that are being discussed also in just the public domain. And we're going to kick off with opening up the economy, as well as looking at the recent spate of hospital closures in Rwanda based on issues of medical malpractice or negligence. My name is Diana Mpisi, host of the show, and I'm happy to be here tonight on Views Edition number 24. So I will kick off with the gradual opening of the economy. And Charles, Berna, I would like to hear your thoughts on this. It's been less than a week since government eased the nationwide COVID-19 curfew. It's now 12 midnight until from 4 a.m. until midnight. In addition to this, business time has been extended to 11 a.m. 11 p.m. Private businesses are working at full capacity. We also have swimming pools, massage parlors, and saunas that are gradually reopening. For the first time in 18 months, bars are also reopening. And, generally speaking, there's a semblance of normalcy that the country is returning to, especially when we look at the economy and businesses, so to speak. Most importantly, I think for people who are traveling, Bren, I know you're traveling tomorrow, you're not required to quarantine if you present a COVID-19 vaccination certificate. Yeah, if you're fully vaccinated on return back to Rwanda. So it's a big relief, I think, even on people's financial pockets coming back home. So my question to you, and I'll kick off with you, Charles, is what is your take on these developments? And most importantly, if there are any issues you've identified, because we're a very solution-oriented show, are there any ideas you have on how some of these issues can be addressed?
First of all, it's not accurate that business has returned to normalcy, because first, businesses have to close by 11 p.m.
11 p.m., yes.
Yeah, so that cuts out a large section of the nightlife. Secondly, is that it's a step in the right direction, and I think we need to give the government of Rwanda and all the other actors around it credit where it's due, because what has happened is that because of the fight and the vigilance and the obedience and everything, that's why we are where we are. It's very humbling. Today, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced a full lift of their lockdown, and I know for a fact they've not done...
Lockdown or curfew?
Oh, curfew, sorry. I don't think there's a huge difference, but just for purposes of emphasis. But the point I'm trying to raise is, if they were not as a third as strict as we are, and they have fully lifted, then why haven't we fully lifted? There could be an argument that they're probably going into elections, and therefore it's more of a political decision than a health decision.
Which it is.
But the bigger point for us in Rwanda is that if you have more than 90% of people who are vaccinated, I think 99% is the last numbers I checked, for people who had one dose.
In Kigali? In
Kigali alone. And then there was a random test that was done about 2 weeks ago, and there was nobody who tested positive in the hotspots. So why not open up a little bit more? The nightlife allows people to exchange money quite a bit, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at. But then, and Ban, I think the second point that I need to raise is around coordination around the different organs. So Cabinet will release minutes and say, we have allowed this to happen, and then we'll allow mini-spoke if it is sports, or RDB if it's business, and so on and so forth, to come up with the details on how that will work. So the trickle-down effect is a bit of a problem. DJs are being arrested and thrown into prison. Clubs are being closed and for months, weeks. So I get a feeling that there is something that's not working right, or police will say, and I sort of want to exonerate police a little bit on this one, because they will put a roadblock somewhere in front of somebody's establishment because they are looking for drunken drivers. I don't think they need to be that aggressive, because they'll find the they have been finding the drunken drivers anyway. Why have they decided that it is now time to put a roadblock in front of a nightclub just because clubs have been allowed to open? When clubs were operating, when we were running a 24-hour economy, they were not putting these roadblocks in front of the establishments. So I think we need to work a little bit smarter. If the economy is opening, it's because people need to make money. They don't need to break the law, but everybody within the ecosystem needs to understand that people need to make money within the confines. So I think the point I'm trying to raise is really that the local authorities, the police, are not understanding that they have spent so much time distributing free food that they should allow people to make some money. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. When you say it like that, free food and that analogy. I would like to come back to you, Charles, but let me hear from Berna. And I'd like to come back to you specifically on your points talking about the lack of the trickle-down effect, from when the directives are put from these higher institutions, whether it's RDB, whether it's, from cabinet, to the lack of sort of coordination in implementing them. We'll come back to that later. Yeah. Brenna, what's your take on this? Is there any issues that are out there? How can they be addressed? And what's also your general take on the gradual reopening of the economy? I know a lot of people are excited. I am personally. And like Charles said, it's very important for businesses, especially livelihoods, to open.
Okay. Allow me to first respond to Charles.
Yes, absolutely.
I have some comments on the police getting closer to the venues. I mean, you want to save a life before they're on the road, so I would give them credit actually. And also, there's no reason.
It's not just about putting, getting money.
Because if the cabs are working 24/7. Why should it be a problem? You can get a cab and find your way home. And at some point, we had young people who were volunteering to drive people.
Which still happens.
Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about the police.
No, last week we talked about aggression.
Okay,
yes.
That's a separate issue. But I feel that if they can prevent accidents by getting closer, I don't see any problem. I would be concerned if they're coming in and saying, oh, lower the sound, or it's a problem.
It has happened too.
That I would be concerned. Secondly, again on vaccination, vaccination, as we know, does not make you immune to COVID. And also, if you look at the numbers, even if we have, if you compare with the region, we're doing well with the first doses acceleration. If you look at the studies we have had about, the vaccine efficacy, you want to wait and have a significant number of people who have received the 2 doses before you can actually fully reopen. So on that, for me, I think the government is doing the right thing.
We need to be vigilant as well.
Yes, we need to, and also because if you look at some of even the advanced world, which has accelerated vaccination, Some of them right now are concerned that the cases are going up, even if the death rates are a bit low, but you still have cases. And Africa also generally faces a different risk, which is mutilation, the different variants, because the vaccination rates are quite low. So if you're an African country, even if you have vaccinated, your neighbors haven't done so, the risk is actually still significant. So we must not lose sight of that. Now, if we look at the trend, going back to your question around reopening of the economy, you can clearly see that the hard work that the people at the central bank or the Ministry of Finance that have put into in terms of ensuring that you have some continuity, it's actually beginning to pay off. And the numbers that we have, for instance, real GDP 3.5 in the first quarter of this year, after almost 3 consecutive quarters of a recession. That is progress. We also saw that from the central bank again, the composite index of economic activities increased by 32.4%, against 9.4, in the same quarter. And this really shows that the economy is picking up. Now, for me, the concern is around the jobs. I haven't seen the numbers, whether people are actually getting back to work. If we had those numbers, then we would have more confidence that if people are getting back to work, then you can be sure that consumption will go up. Because
and it's not even so much about getting to work, but also those who have failed to get to work permanently. What are those numbers as well? Because there's some people who...
Yes, who have failed to return to work, yeah. So if you have an uptick in jobs, then you can also expect that consumption will go up. So you want that as businesses open, people are actually spending. So if you don't have a job or if your business is still struggling, then, the consumption may not be as, as expected to actually boost. The other numbers that I haven't looked at that would also be interesting is to look at lending to the private sector. We know that banks have really struggled over the last 1 year or so because they've had a lot of loan rescheduling, is it what it is called?
Restructuring.
Restructuring, yes. You have the restructuring, and I think towards the end of the year and early next year is when we will see some of the more properties on the market, that have probably gone bad.
Auctions.
Yes. So there's that bit of a risk because even when a bank like Bank of Kigali has done very well, but they will tell you that they still have a risk around that. But what we want to see is more lending because the more lending to the private sector, then the more it is possible to create economic opportunities. Lastly, government spending. We saw that the heavy investment that went into construction of schools also brought some life in the economy. Reopening of schools also kind of brings us back to life, but we need government to spend more because if you look at the structure of our economy, we're still largely dependent on government. Yes. I know it is difficult right now if you look at the environment because there's always the issue of are you spending too much and where is this money going to come from? You've been borrowing and it's the margin, the room to borrow is still, there's a bit of constraint in the international environment. But I think government has to spend more. Government has to spend more and we need Rwanda revenue to remit, give people their returns,
I know sometimes we've had a couple of discussions on the show where those returns, some businesses.
Yeah, because for some businesses it's really a significant amount, and
some don't get them.
Yes,
for many years.
Yes. So if government spends, if government also pays its suppliers on time, then you'll see a huge boost. So overall, so far, I think we're on track. Again, this week we saw mice coming back to life, with around, I think, 600 participants. That also supports, but we need more because we are coming from a very low base.
Thank you,
I want to
comprehensive examples you gave there. Yes, Charles?
Yes, I just want to supplement to that onto two things, and one specific to events and the multiplier effect of that. So there's a big microfinance event happening. The government of Rwanda and the government of Luxembourg have signed a big deal around supporting our International Finance Center and our microfinance setup. But also, one of the things that never went to sleep was sports tourism. I may sound a little bit biased, but throughout COVID, as a cricket fan, there's going to be 6 international tournaments by the time 2021 has ended. Basketball is a big income earner. It's a shame that we didn't get it well with football and we lost the other tournaments that we'd have earned. It didn't matter that we messed up with volleyball, but still we earned that income. So it just shows you that some of these ends that we can cash on, irrespective of COVID, we need to put in more effort in some of those areas, and they will definitely pay up. Of course, sportsmen by definition are party animals. And I want to link this to my previous points. Can you imagine basketball? Basketball, as the owners of basketball teams are the biggest billionaires in the world that you could ever imagine. Now imagine if BAL came into this country next year and we had no lockdown. But you can't blame anyone of that because we had a lockdown. So if we successfully hosted all the mayors, including the mayor of Paris in this town, when we were in a lockdown, if we hosted the owners of NBA clubs when we were in a lockdown, now imagine if they came when we were not in a lockdown, right? So I think we have a huge opportunity. We just need to cash on it, and we need everybody to come on board to understand that when people spend a lot of their euros and dollars to come into this country, they must go home broke.
Leave their money.
Yes, they must leave all their money in here. But so that's on one side of the event. I think we have a fantastic opportunity. We have to ensure that we create an ecosystem where we eat every dollar that comes into this market. But I also want to talk about something Bernard just said that tickled my mind around government expenditure. So I want to cut government some slack around expenditure because they've had to feed people who had no jobs, and therefore we can't really blame them. It would be irresponsible of us to say you didn't give people VAT returns, yet we know very well they were feeding hundreds of thousands of people who had no food to eat at all. But moving forward, I think it's something that there needs to be a plan that pharmacy, that book supplier, that guy who built a school, that guy, what's a plan? Because if you look at it purely from VAT refunds, you miss the point. There's a lot of other goods and services that have been sold and supplied to government that are a little bit difficult to collect today, and some of them have been in essential services. Yeah, so I think that's something that will make a very big difference if they get paid on time.
But it's almost more or less what Brenna was saying.
If I could briefly reflect on that. I want to imagine the food that was being distributed was actually from our food reserves. So
Yes, it was, yeah.
we should be restocking. But
Which is an opportunity.
yes.
And we are restocking.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. But also, when you talk about having people come in and making sure that they go back without any, yes. I don't know how that can happen. If you look at currently, even without COVID, the official working hours, yeah. If people open their coffee shops, 8:30 or 9, and then they are closed maybe 6.
I don't know any coffee shop that does that.
6 or 7, they are there. But my point is, until we have a 24/7 economy, operations, meaning that it is okay for a bar to be open 24/7 because people are consuming. Now, of course, the bar is like the wrong example, terrible example. But what you really need is that you have people working in shifts, and it's going. We saw this at some point when the borders were open 24/7. You have movements before COVID. A lot of people planning, actually, they come do what they have to do during the day and then they move. So, and there's a lot that happens, a lot of spending that happens around that. So I feel if we could, maybe our private sector could also think about the working hours.
It doesn't make any economic sense at all.
Well,
but
see,
I want to
Yes,
get your
and,
point.
yes.
You're talking about
there was actually a huge Twitter debate today around that.
Just hold on.
Yes.
For the sake of clarification, what do you mean exactly when you talk about, what can help the economy in terms of creating more jobs? Is a shift sort of basis? You're saying that, you should have more people and then it's separated into different shifts so you can have more people in the job market? Is that what you're...
Yeah, so currently, the entertainment sector aside, you'll have that very few businesses or organizations remain open after 6. Yeah, meaning people go to work at 8
and clock out at 6.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so you have over 50% of the population actually sleeping. It doesn't work like that around the world.
So what I'm trying to get from you is, if I'm a business owner, for instance, and I have a restaurant and I want to operate for longer hours, you're saying that I should invest in a shift basis that will enable more people to be employed?
Yes. And so
but
it can't just...
Doesn't that already happen? Even pre-COVID, if you worked in a hotel or bar, your shift is from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yes, but you see,
Yeah.
there's a mismatch at the moment. If, for instance, you keep your hotel open, you want to make sure that you actually have guests, yeah? But if the typical mentality is after 5, maybe if I leave work, I go home, I don't have to pass by a place and have a drink or, socialize, or limit socializing to Saturday and Sunday, we are missing out, yeah? Or think of it this way, if you're a tourist, in this country, you've come in, you have limited options during the week. You kind of have to wait for Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. So what I would want to see, or what I think we should be thinking about,
let her finish, please.
Is that we find a way of facilitating that. Yeah, because it's one thing for businesses to open, but if they are not getting clients, then it doesn't make sense.
But,
yeah, but you could facilitate that. Yeah, by, for instance, if there's a shift culture, or clocking hours. Yeah? I've been campaigning for flexible working hours, for instance.
In the workplace,
yeah?
yes.
Yes. If you have flexible working hours, meaning you are at this organization, for instance, you're an accountant, let's say, during the day, yeah.
And by night you're a DJ.
Yes, you're a DJ, or you are whatever, yeah. So But that cannot just happen overnight, and it cannot. It takes a lot of creative thinking to see how we kind of rethink the current structure.
And I think in addition to that, it's also about mindset. I feel like even pre-pandemic, there were issues to do with, like you said, there were just not many options. In Rwanda, it's city of Kigali, you compare it to other cities in the region, it does not have a thriving, bustling, post 6 p.m. sort of entertainment, creative night scene, whether it's trying to, utilize our car-free zone to have cafes popping up after 6 p.m., some restaurants popping up. I feel like pre-pandemic, there was also limitations in our part of the economy that's a high earner, by the way. It's not to just diminish it for some people because they're just thinking entertainment and that sort of thing. But as an earner at this part of the economy, I think pre-pandemic was very limited. And personally, I would like to see, we are taking it step by step. Charles, I wanted to also talk to you about that. We're taking it pole pole, and we will get there. But I hope that we will be, at least our private sector, more creative in how we can enable a very high-earning sector, and I'm talking about the hospitality, the entertainment sector, when things have been lifted to the point we can more or less resume activities to the year before last.
I think the point I want to raise, Diana, is that, and always the thing about viewers' editions is that it's more spicy when I disagree with Bana.
Of course.
But I believe that is the responsibility to appreciate the value proposition of mice is on everybody across the value chain.
It's not just one sector.
Yes. There's no way you can own a bar at Kisimenti and you're employing 100 people and feeding
hundreds more.
And a guy who's the executive guy of Murenje can come and put handcuffs on a DJ. He doesn't get the impact of the economy because in his mind he's only doing his job. And that's just one example I have given. It applies to the guy who's doing a breathalyzer on somebody who's taken one bottle of beer. So we miss the point when we don't look at the bigger picture. If everybody wants to do their own thing and say, because you have failed a breathalyzer test or because your sound is beyond your parking, or because people are 30 people are dancing yet only 29 are supposed to be dancing in your nightclub, we miss the point. The whole world has opened up, including Rwanda. You just gave an example of a big event that's happening. It's happening, we've opened up. So let's make up our minds. Do we want to make money or we don't want to make money? For crying out loud, we've even lifted the necessity to go through a transit hotel before you get out. So you can get, if you're vaccinated, you get in, get your PCR test, and then you go out. So we're encouraging people to come in. The country is starved of revenue. Do we want to make that revenue that we've been starved of fines from people we lock up? Are we making up from
stadium?
Yes, stadium locking up and what have you. I don't get it. So
Stadiums are for sports.
Yes. Don't we want VW to make money? Don't we want Yego Cubs to make money, and so on and so forth? So I think there's and it's become a rhyme. It's annoying that it's 4 years that it's become a rhyme here on the square around the institutional coordination. But everybody needs to understand that this economy is starved of revenue. The same way Rwanda Revenue Authority gets a percentage of the revenues that they collect. Is the same way everybody needs to understand that if tourists come into the country and money gets to everybody, there's a global economic, I mean, there's a national economic benefit. And I think that's where we're getting it, we're not getting it right, that if we are sports and a sports destination, an entertainment destination, we bring the best artists into this country, we bring the biggest tournaments into this country, people should not go back bored. People should not go back crying.
And to add to what you're saying, Charles, we actually even have the infrastructure.
Yes,
for it.
Which we have spent billions.
You're talking
on.
about,
yes.
you know, the arena. You're talking about the, you know,
Kigali
the
Convention
Center. You're talking about the roads. You're talking about security.
Yes.
You're talking about a lot. But I still go back to my point that I believe it's a balance. I believe it's a balance. I feel like we should be a bit more patient and still stay vigilant, so that we can actually see these things
you
opening
actually
to
know
your
it's
point.
I believe it's not a COVID issue.
I think it is. You cannot totally divorce it. Charles, you can't totally divorce this decision
I'll give you a practical
from the pandemic times that
Why
we're
should
living
you
in?
handcuff a DJ who is operating within the timeline? So you pick up a DJ at 9:50 p.m.
And you've told people curfews at midnight.
And you've told people curfew at midnight, close your business at 10 p.m. Sorry, at 11 p.m. You handcuff a DJ and store him away for 11 hours or 24 hours or how much longer?
So I think that but just very quickly, I'd love to hear from Bernard. I think to go to your point, I think those are issues of miscommunication. You know, what has been decided on a sort of higher level, you know, there's a cabinet meeting minutes, this is what we have agreed. RDB rolls out, you know, the directives gradually, clearly. I think somewhere along the line, there's a sort of broken telephone, whereby when it comes down to the enforcers, there's a miscommunication. But that's not to say that we should still be patient, because we're living in a pandemic, to get to what you're suggesting. That's going to take another 3, 4, 5 months. But I'm really relieved to see that we're getting there. But to your point, I feel that's an issue of issue of miscommunication. Yes,
I must give you 11 out of 10 for the job that you do.
It's very personal.
That's serious.
No, it's extremely painful because people come here to spend their money, and the multiplier
Charles,
effect.
We can't get to where you're saying tomorrow. Let's be realistic, please.
No, I'll beg to differ, because.
And you still don't think it's a COVID thing?
No, it's not a COVID thing.
Let's move on
because somebody's making money.
Let's move to Bernard.
Just so that we don't just say it's only the entertainment
sector here.
Yeah, or buzz. Back to my earlier point about a need for more creativity and innovation around creating that kind of 24/7 economy. I was just thinking about children today, and looking at the work schedule for parents. Yeah, you find that most parents are worried about rushing home, rushing to schools to pick their kids, you know, and most of them either will send someone or have to rush. Yeah, and then if it's weekends, most parents don't even have a place, you know, where they can take their children. Yeah, and you wonder why we don't have, you know,
parks,
several options for children. If you've left school, maybe there has to be something that the child, you know, maybe a place that.
I hear what you're saying. A drama school, or a recreation center.
Yes,
and I feel like it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we need to really, as a private sector, the onus is going to be on us. Let's come up with these ideas. We can't keep on saying government this, government that, handout here, this, that, more spending. I feel like the private sector, look, we're gradually opening up. I'm part of the private sector. Now is our time to really put our heads on the table and collaborate and come up with these options. You know, if you want a 24/7 economy, like you're saying, the onus is on the private sector. Yeah, and I feel like it's been sleeping, even pre-pandemic. And Charles, to get to your point, a lot more, you're saying you want things to go back to normal, a lot more work will need to be done by businesses to achieve
I agree with you, but by virtue of the fact that it was an issue even pre-pandemic,
yes, like Brenna
then
is saying,
it means it's a bit of a problem. Also,
but it's an opportunity to try something different.
If somebody is listening,
I think they are. I'd like us to get to our next point. Thank you, Charles. Thank
Yes.
you, Berna. It's always interesting when you have opposing views, but yeah, I think this is what the square is about. The second part of the conversation is to do with the closure of medical facilities. Starting 19th of September, we had a total of 2 hospitals that have been closed to date. This is Bao Hospital, and the other one I think is called BMC Hospital, if I'm not mistaken. And these hospitals were closed on issues by various authorities, Ministry of Health and partners, issues to do with malpractice, issues to do with negligence, issues to do with just not being compliant on so many levels. And, you know, the public debate, you know, in the court of public opinion is this deserving? What happens to patients? What is the long-term effect? And my question to you, Charles and Brenna, and I'll start with you, Brenna, is do you think this is a deterrent for medical facilities to actually toe the line and kind of deal with this rising issue? Just last week, but when we discussed this on the square, medical negligence and malpractice. We had health practitioners here. We had legal experts here. Do you think this is a deterrent for this rising trend in medical negligence and malpractice? And yeah, what's your take on it in general?
I must say that I have very strong views against outsourcing health to the private sector. I have very strong views about that. Even when I understand that these private businesses, you know, they create jobs, but I have very strong views. I feel that healthcare must remain the responsibility of government, you know, so...
And these facilities were private hospitals?
Yes, I think the majority, even though we have cases still in public hospitals. Yeah, so public, you know, healthcare must remain the responsibility of government so that we don't have many people rushing to private healthcare because they feel, you know, public hospitals are not to that standard. Yeah. And now, I don't think that closing the facilities solves any issue. I don't think so. And I also think that it is bad for business. Because when someone has invested money,
especially in
setting up, yes. So there's an investment, not just into infrastructure. There are jobs there. So even if we look at it and say it's delicate, you cannot replace one life lost, but we also must have a sight of the bigger picture, which is these are businesses. You need to protect them. I would imagine that a better way of handling that, for instance, is to come up with, you know, hefty sanctions, for instance, to say if there is, you know, negligence or practice, you know, make the sanctions clear so that, in a way, I think it would help with compliance. But the other issue, and I think which is even a bigger issue, is with the Ministry of Health. Are they rushing out to license some of these private facilities? Yes, before they've actually done, you know, the due diligence. Yes. Because if you do that, as we have seen in some of the cases, someone will say, I have a license, you know. So, and as in any job, even in medicine, you will have, there will be issues, yeah? But closing does not solve the problem. So if you strengthen, one, the due diligence ahead of licensing, I think you could save more lives. That's number one. Number two, if you enforce the standards, you know, if you give someone a license and you take it upon yourself to actually enforce what you have tasked them to do, then you'll protect the patients. But if we are to wait and only respond because we've seen a patient go online and complain and it's viral and we react to that, I don't think it solves any problem. Yeah. So for me, I feel the Ministry of Health has to spend more time carefully, looking at some of these private health providers, do the due diligence, and also enforce the standards just to minimize the cases. When they happen, have a sanctions, regime that is very clear
and very strong.
Yes, to kind of help.
I think my opinion is twofold. Number one is that medical negligence is the most difficult thing to prove in a court of law. I foresee a situation where these doctors will get away with it.
In fact, some go and practice elsewhere.
Yeah.
After cases of malpractice, we have doctors who've gone to other countries.
Actually, let me rephrase. Not get away with it. It's one of the easiest cases to argue as a lawyer, because what competence does a judge have to interpret? Yes, you have expert opinions on medical reports that have been given, but if we are in the same profession, I will always put myself in the same position as you and assume if I was in that theater and I was the one with that patient, what would I have done otherwise?
Different.
So medical negligence, and I think one of the previous guy we had was, I think, the chairman of the medical council who was here, told us.
And dental council,
yes. It's a very difficult thing to, they should not have gone that route. I think Bana was just being polite with what she was saying. I think what the government of Rwanda was just trying to do was to show that they have done something. But that case will not see the light of day. That's number one. But again, I will disagree with Bana. It is not the business of the government to regulate the medical sector amongst other professionals. It is the business of the professions themselves.
The professional bodies.
Yes, the professional bodies themselves. If the valuers regulate themselves, why shouldn't the medics regulate themselves? Which they most likely do. And I'm almost sure that they do, because the other time when we met the young man who was here, and even his predecessor, Dr. Emmanuel Rudachema, they actually have a regulatory and role in the Rwanda Medical and Dental Council.
Yes.
So the onus of regulating should be purely left for the professionals, especially for such very high caliber professions. So the role of the government should just be not to license the physical infrastructure as opposed to the profession itself. Now, and I'll link this to our earlier topic around mice.
But sorry, just very quickly, because we don't have all the time in the world, Charles. I know when we don't have guests, we kind of, forget about that. But my question I wanted to ask, to someone who's lost a mother, who went in, for example, to remove an intrauterine device and was given anesthesia, very basic operation, and died. How do you tell them what you're telling them? The role of the government is not to do this. I'm just thinking, is it because perhaps the regulatory bodies, the professional bodies, are limiting themselves in what they do, and government had to step in and say, look, something needs to be done, because it's been a rising trend, at least over the last 5 years. So my question is to you, to just make it a bit more personalized, what would you tell someone who, has lost a loved one through some of these
I wish you had phrased it in a different way and asked me what would I look at in terms of regulation being a lot better. I think professional indemnity is one of you can't bring back a life.
True.
Yeah, but from a professional perspective, I think the practitioners have to be more responsible than they are, and they have to be held accountable because they hold lives at stake. I think that's the biggest thing by far. It doesn't matter whether their premiums are 3-4-fold, if at all they exist, but it also means that there's a ripple effect. If their premiums are going to be a lot higher in terms of medical, in terms of professional indemnity, it also means that even us, as people who seek those services, we have to be ready to part with higher consultation fees because because the doctors are going to be held more highly accountable.
Just hold on to that. I really want us to read our tweets from our viewers.
Can I respond
if
to
you
that very
can,
quickly?
Can you hold it to your concluding remarks? Yes, because we have a few minutes left. The first tweet that is coming in, if you could have that on our screens, is from Fred Kagame. And Fred says that abrupt closure of hospitals is more dangerous than what it intends to solve. Imagine what happens to patients with appointments. Instead of individuals should be pinned for mistakes done and allow other medics to run the hospitals in the right professional way. I think Fred is echoing Charles and Brenna what you're saying to a large extent. We have another tweet coming in from Kyle who says that hospital closure is pressure from media. We have few hospitals available and again getting closed, the final effect is on the patients. These are some of the tweets we have and I would like to just tell our guests to keep the conversation going using #TheSquareRW. Thank you very much for your views. Brenna, over to you, and then Charles before we close.
Yeah, I would like to react to that. When Charles says that it is the business of professionals to regulate themselves, yes and no. We know this from the media, for instance. We were given the tools to regulate ourselves, but as we speak as of today, it has completely failed because we were not ready.
I don't think that's a good example.
We were not ready.
Are you talking about the RMC?
Yes, we were not ready. We still have room to,
improve.
Yes, so what I mean in terms of regulation, because it's the Ministry of Health that issues licenses for facilities, yeah? The professional body can enforce, standards within the members, yeah? But you have to begin by strengthening the professional bodies, first of all, to be independent and also have the right resources. So
they might actually be strapped, and that's why they
are. I mean, I don't know if Charles has spoken to most of these professional bodies. They are under-resourced. They don't have actually the resources they need to, one, protect their professionals, and they're not really independent per se, So it is a problem. But why I feel that it is the responsibility of government, it is, we vote, Rwandans are given a choice. The people they hold to account are elected officials, yeah? A professional is not an elected official. So there's a distinction. Someone who is campaigns, and we have the right to hold our political leadership to account because they do campaign for these things and we give them the power to represent us. So we expect them to do the same. I feel that for us to have the responsibility of professional bodies, one is to protect their members, yeah? But to be able to do that, they must be, one, well-trained and well-resourced. You also need, to have a strong ecosystem around this. How many lawyers do we have that are specialized in medical law? How many? Judges. We face the same issue even in media. The judge for the first time is dealing with a media case and they have no sense of the media law. So I think we would be getting ahead of ourselves to look at the professional bodies as they are today and feel that we can confidently outsource enforcement to them. It is a progressive, it must be done progressively as we build the critical mass of skilled professionals.
That we need.
Yeah.
Charles?
I think that's a fair point. It's a fair point around professionalism.
Yes. But also,
I
want this to also be your closing remarks.
Yes. It's a fair point. But I want to talk about, in my closing remarks, the medical space. So, and I'll give an example of the specific two institutions, the hospitals that were closed. One of them is renting a property and it pays millions of francs where it is renting, but it is about to complete a brand new hospital that has spent billions of francs of equity and debt. So there is a lot of stake. There's bankers' money, there's whatever. But even where they're employing people, those people have families and so on and so forth. So it's not about, it's beyond the service that they offer and what have you. The second facility that was closed in Biryogo is the owner of the property is not involved in the management at all. So he's just a renter of the property, and these are, I'm told there are up to 40 doctors who put themselves together to run this property. Wow. So there's all these practitioners who have spent their decades of experience to invest their time and efforts in this facility, and the vertical integration and what have you of everybody who is earning from and of them. So you cannot afford to say that you're just closing it just like that. So the point I'm raising is, and to a small extent I'll agree with Bana, that government should look at the bigger picture and say, how else can we ensure that these people who actually offer a service, who are affecting the banks, who are affecting all these jobs, who are affecting all these families, can be assisted, as opposed to just waking up in the morning and saying we're putting a padlock. And I believe that's the bigger picture around the role of the professionals and the professional board and the professional body. Say, let government do its job in terms of protecting the bigger picture, but let the professionals do their job in terms of protecting the profession.
I agree with both of you. I think you're saying the same thing in different ways, so to speak. We have the last tweet that I'd like to read. It's quite interesting, and if we can have that on our screens. The tweet is from Stella Musoni, and she says that a couple of thoughts on hospital closures. One, the bulk of the closures are private clinics and hospitals because they're held to a higher standard. The expectation is if one is paying a premium on healthcare, they should receive stellar care. Her second tweet below, and Charles, I think she echoes what you were talking about, higher premiums because you're going to receive higher, care. Her second tweet is on, she says that self-regulation is a double-edged sword. How likely is a colleague to recommend the stripping of a friend's license? The regulator often needs independent oversight as well. Thank you very much for your tweet, Stella. Please keep your tweets coming through. Very interesting opinions you have there, and I think she echoes, Barna, literally what you.
Can I say something on a light note about Baho?
Okay, very briefly.
So they closed their and pun intended, their little rental clinic, but they're about to finish a huge multi-billion-dollar hospital that they're looking at putting, associating with our capital markets.
Oh, wow. Sounds very interesting. Yes. Like I always say on the show, I hope, whether it's policymakers or private sector captains of industry are listening to your very interesting and solid interventions. Thank you very much, Charles. It's been a pleasure. Bernadette, always a pleasure to have you on the show. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Keep the conversation going using #TheSquareRW. I'd like to thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee, for always supporting The Square. Thank you very much. Keep the conversation going, and we'll see you again next week. Have a good night.